everyone. Welcome to Cyber Smart Conversations with Harsha. I have with me founder and CEO of Vendor PM, Emil Brill. With exposure and experiences alongside facility and property managers, Emil led to establish Vendor PM, a vendor management and procurement software built specifically for the property management industry. Vendor PM connects buyers to over 40,000 vendors and reduces operational cost, saves property team countless hours, and significantly reduces vendor risk and liability. In only 3 short years, Vendor PM is live in over 6,000 buildings. Thank you for joining, and how are you doing today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. And great to have you on the podcast. Emil, one of the questions I always like to start with is to share about the career path. I would love to hear more about you and your background.
Yeah, happy to. And I can share a little bit about my background and how that segues into Vendor PM because the two are very much so interconnected. At a young age, around 14, 15, I wanted to help out my mom and sister. I wanted to start my first business. So I started this residential window cleaning company. And so me and a couple friends from high school, we would go door to door. We would sell window cleaning services here in Toronto and the broader GTA. And this was to single family homes, to homeowners. And we had actually grown this business throughout high school, throughout early days of university. We had 60, 70 staff. We're cleaning over 10,000 homes a summer. So we built this into, a real business that we were really proud of. And eventually, as we grew this residential window cleaning company, we found ourselves starting to work with property managers. And so that's when we started servicing buildings, office buildings, condo buildings, apartment buildings, industrial, every asset class. To be candid, we just couldn't believe the amount of money that property managers were spending on something like window cleaning, especially when you compare that to residential, to single family homes. And so, we did some homework and some research, and we quickly came to understand that property management companies in North America alone are spending over $500 billion a year on services for their properties, right? Obviously, it goes far beyond just window cleaning. And so, we looked at that significant dollar spend, that $500 billion plus number, and we thought to ourselves, okay, in such a large market, the way that vendors and property managers work together, that must be sophisticated, it must be modern, it must be efficient. But the harsh reality is that it's anything but, it's still heavily reliant on email, Excel, and word of mouth. And having worked with, thousands of property managers, thousands of buildings across the country, it just became clear that there are real pain points and challenges both on the supply and on the demand side. And so again, clear challenges, clear opportunity, massive market, is one that I'm very passionate about. I saw this as an opportunity. And so in January of 2020, we started Vendor PM. And the mission of Vendor PM is to modernize the way that vendors and property managers work together. Now, a little bit of the inspiration for Vendor PM came from platforms like Angie's List or HomeStars, which I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with. So we thought to ourselves, let's build this two-sided marketplace for vendors and property managers, but for the commercial real estate world, not for single family homes. And we launched that early 2020, and we actually got some really good initial traction. But what we learned listening to all of our users, to our prospective users and customers, was that this marketplace of connecting vendors and property managers is really helpful. But what they need is more. To actually utilize Vendor PM day to day, they need robust vendor management software, robust vendor procurement software, and then really comprehensive reporting and data functionality. And so that really kicked off this transition and evolution of Vendor PM from a pure marketplace to a marketplace that has software. As we continue growing, we're continuing to build out more and more robust software, right? So when you really encompass what Vendor PM is today, it's vendor management and vendor procurement software built specifically for the property management industry that further connects vendors and property managers in a single marketplace, right? And so today, we're a little over 3 years since starting the business. We're at over 80 employees. We've raised over $30 million from some of the world's best investors, some fantastic Canadian investors, some fantastic US investors. We have some really cool angel investors, such as the CEO of Avis and Young, or the former CEO of Twitter, not Elon Musk, but Dick Costolo, and just some really incredible partners that have supported us along this way. And we're operational across all of Canada, and state by state, we're growing throughout the US as well. So that's a little bit about how we started, about my career path, and also where vendor PM is today.
That's so inspirational, starting a business at an early age, understanding the pain points of the industry, and then building vendor PM.
I think, yeah, it's that really, I believe, is the only way to innovate and create solutions. I mean, it's for someone, let's say in finance, to think, oh, maybe property managers need this solution, build a solution. The reality is it's going to be so far from what they actually need because that individual is so far removed from those pain points. And that same philosophy has guided all of our product development, design, and engineering since starting vendor PM. I mean, we have a scorecard internally that we have to interview 10 property managers a week to ensure that every single feature, every single button is being built with that user's mind, that user's voice in mind at all times.
Yeah, for sure. You have to understand the pain points and the end user journey. Yeah.
Exactly.
So today's discussion is about modernization of property management and ESG. So like you said, the standard definition of property management, if we go by the dictionary, is about the day-to-day management of real property. But in the last few years, we have seen landlords and property managers, they have started to focus on technology to achieve like reduced operational cost, improved services, better budget management, and even like tenant services. So now if we give a new definition, modernization, increased tenant satisfaction and owner profit. So what is your definition of a modern management when it comes to property management? And how do you see this as an impact to ESG goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we have to look at both of those separately. So, first and foremost, I think that modern property management is not accepting the answer of, well, this is how we have always done it, right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's something that we as prop tech companies hear constantly. And it's something that, if you just look at the adoption curve, your early adopters, your early innovators, and your early majority are obviously recognizing the fact that this isn't how it's always going to be done. And there are better ways to do these things, right? And I think ways to measure that could be obviously in terms of how competitive you are within your market from a property management company. Are you consistently winning new business and are you growing? Right? If you are, then you certainly have a competitive edge because owners are sophisticated and owners are looking for that competitive edge. Another way to measure that is, of course, through tenant satisfaction. But something like the behind the scenes work of working with vendors has significant impacts on tenant satisfaction, not just in terms of delivering great service vendors at the right price for your tenants, but also a property management team being able to dedicate their time on higher value, higher leverage activities, such as tenant satisfaction. If a software like Vendor PM can remove, let's say, 4 or 5 hours a week from a property manager's administrative workflow, and that 4 to 5 hours can then be applied to something like tenant satisfaction or any new innovative ideas. Because property managers are have so many incredible ideas, but so much little time to actually implement and execute them. Then yes, that is another way to actually enable modern property management. But I think at its core, it's looking at those things that we've been doing the same way for far too long, recognizing it won't always be done this way, and taking action to innovate and lead the change because change is something that's still significantly required in our industry. I mean, our industry is heavily antiquated, and I think we're doing fantastic things and making great progress. But relative to many other industries, we're still light years behind.
Agreed. Like if you look at other industry, automobiles, aerospace, they are way ahead of property industry. But I agree, we are seeing the change. But then this question, how to start or from where to start? Like as property management sector is getting modernized, there are opportunities to optimize operations or save property managers time, like gain more profits using technology. But then for the team who's doing manual work or we have been doing this way for years, how to start and from where to start.
Mhm. Yeah, and again, I think there's a way to look at this both from from the direct question you asked, but also from that ESG perspective. So I'll try to speak to both. But first, well, let's acknowledge the fact that change is never easy. No matter how positive that change can be, too much change too fast can actually be detrimental. It can be counterproductive. And I'm sure that your listeners know that all too well. That feeling of, oh, great, yet another platform that we need to log into. Right. So I think in that perspective, it's very important that buyers don't necessarily chase that next shiny object. They don't buy something because that's what their competitor did as an example, they need to buy for the problem and not necessarily for the solution, right? So that's always a great place to start. If the problem is that you and your tenants need to reduce operational spend, if you need to ensure that you're following procurement policies, such as receiving 3 bids across, all building services, or perhaps, that property managers are largely, they have too much on their plate. Their days are too full and they're bogged down with manual work, and they need to spend more time on something like, tenant satisfaction, working with tenants. Then perhaps you want to look at something like vendor PM, because that is something that is going to address those specific problems and those needs. But if there's no need, if there's no problem, then it's not a place that you should be looking at, right? It should be driven by that need and by that problem. In that same lens, that problem statement or that need may come from an external stakeholder. And I think that's a great place to start as well. And this is where I think ESG comes into play a lot as well. A lot of owners, a lot of the larger sophisticated owners have put a lot of time, investments, and focus on ESG, right? And so not just internally, but externally as well. They're saying we need to ensure that we have a diverse supplier base, that we are procuring this percentage of opportunities and spend to these diverse supplier groups, as an example. They want to ensure that they are always receiving the best possible price for all building services. So they want to ensure that 80% of bids are going to their approved vendors, maybe 20% are going to new vendors. They need to ensure that they're getting 3 bids across all building services. I mean, this fits into buckets such as social and governance. And so we're seeing a lot of that, particularly in the US, but starting to in Canada as well, where the ESG items that are directly correlated to vendor management and risk and to vendor procurement and tendering are driving that need or that problem, which are ultimately resulting in vendor PM or something like vendor PM as a solution. And of course, I'm speaking very much so in a vendor management and procurement biased lens, because that's what we know best. But I think that same logic is applicable across any problem, any need, and therefore driving that respective solution.
Like list the pain points and prioritize when you are looking for a modern management solution. But one of the things that we have seen when it comes to measuring the benefits, understanding what are the benefit that comes out of any solution that you put in a building. Sometimes when the benefits are directly tied to cost, these when there are these operational efficiency solutions and you can measure the cost that you save, you can easily see the benefits. But when it comes to a solution that automates some part of your work or saves time, many times it's difficult to quantify those benefits. So how you quantify the benefits from a new property management system, and you make sure those benefits are seen and measured?
Really, really great question, because it's something that I at least from my perspective, not enough property management companies do. They may have a need, they have a problem, so they buy and invest in modernizing property management through technology for the right reasons, but then they're not necessarily measuring the value and the success of that moving forward. So, that's something that's been critical to us, is that at the onset, when we implement and launch with any new partner, we are agreeing on mutual success criteria. We have quarterly business reviews to review the state of those criteria and how we're progressing towards them. If they're on track, off track, if something's off track, why, and how do we solve for it, right? But I think that fits into the quantitative bucket, right? So ultimately, the quantitative bucket is setting mutually agreed upon success criteria with your technology partner, and of course, measuring and reporting against it. That should not be your responsibility as the buyer. The seller, the technology partner, should be the subject matter expert. They should have what they believe to be best practices for success criteria. They're going to cater those criteria based on why you purchased that software, to ensure that you are directing the ROI and the value that you're expecting out of the software, then again, measuring against it. But that's purely quantitative. That's purely quantitative. You could have, and I've seen this time and time again, a software that does drive the quantitative benefits that you had alluded to, but users hate it. They're like, I can't stand using this, right? And so that isn't beneficial as well. If your staff aren't happy, your tenants won't be happy, and ultimately, you're not going to receive the results that you're looking for. So there's a qualitative aspect to it. There's a second aspect to it. And I think the way that you really measure this qualitative aspect is just simply through communication with your team. Communication with your team will help you understand what the NPS, like the net promoter score, ultimately is of that solution. And is this something your staff are utilizing because they want to. And if they're utilizing it because they want to, you're going to see so much more value, so much better adoption. And second to that, we see when there's improved or greater communication from the buyer to their team, it also helps with that initial adoption in those early implementation phases. And I think we all recognize, again, a number of your listeners will be able to resonate how critical that implementation stage is to the ongoing success of any new technology that's purchased to solve that need or problem.
Agreed with you, because many times we see technology take the front seat and end user journey takes the back seat. But that is equally important because at the end, adoption, and then you mentioned the point of communication. I think right communication to right set of people really helps in adoption of these technology solutions in a building, because many times we have seen we do pilots are there, you measure KPIs, but then there is no path to take those pilots forward because a critical factor called end user journey get missed during those implementation phases.
Exactly. Yeah.
At the same time, like when you put these digital services or technology in a building, that increases the attack surface, and then there comes security. With digitization, we have started to see that not only IT companies, but we have started to see hackers moving towards real estate and other domains um, for purely intent of capturing information or compromising the system or disrupting the operations. So, what are some of the measures you suggest incorporating cybersecurity and mitigate the risk associated with such platforms?
Great question. I only have one answer, which is hire a professional. Look, at the end of the day, nobody, that's going to be a professional in, let's say, property management is also going to be a professional in cybersecurity. At the end of the day, they're both such deep niches that require so much experience and knowledge that, I think you need to ultimately double down on what you do best. And so in our situation, we have hired third-party professionals to support with our security, our cybersecurity, to ensure that our clients are protected as well. And I think that it is a critical area of focus for all the reasons that you just mentioned. And if it's one of those things that it's not important until it becomes a problem. And I think that those that are proactive in hiring a professional in dealing with this properly and ensuring that they've checked all those boxes well in advance are going to be so far ahead of the race. And in fact, they won't have to face, that scary day of, oh, now it's a problem. I need to deal with it.
Absolutely. And those were great points, Emil. One last question.
Mm-hmm.
One piece of advice you want to give to property managers that they can implement today?
There's a lot of prop tech out there. And of course, you can't purchase and you can't utilize everything. I've seen it, I'm starting to see it in certain geographies, in certain areas, certain asset classes, but I think that our industry as a whole just needs to be more open to exploring new technology, taking the time to understand, how am I doing this today? Yes, I get that it's been the way we've done it for 10 years, but can it be done better? Right? So just simply being open to that exploration and therefore not saying, well, this is how we've always done it.
Agreed. Like understand your pain points, innovate, like be open to innovation.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, and it was a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate it.